Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is the start of a new series that I'll be doing on my channel, and I just really wanted to expand my channel, and I thought this would be a great way to do it. So the new series, as you can see in the title and description, is called Coaster Analysis. And what we do in coaster analysis is pretty straightforward. We analyze coasters and rides that I've ridden. So yeah, we're gonna have some good fun with this series, and I generally won't start every episode like this. I'll probably just go right into it, but I wanted to give y'all a little background before I start. So today we are going to be looking at the coaster Iron Rattler. It is an RMC iBox track located at Six Flags Fiesta, Texas in San Antonio. So without further ado, let's get into it. The first thing I want to say about this is my ranking and where it kind of ranks on the list of coasters that I've ridden. Iron Rattler of right now is my number 2 spot coaster, so it's my second favorite coaster that I've ridden. The coaster above that right now is Outlaw Run at SDC. I will get into that later, but right now Iron Rattler is in my number 2 ranking spot. Okay, going into some stats here, we got a height or drop of 171 feet, and that drop has an angle of descent of 81 degrees, so pretty steep, almost vertical, but not exactly, because vertical would be 90. 81 does feel like vertical though. That is the exact same angle of the drop that Outlaw Run has at Silver Dollar City, which again I will get into in a minute. It's got a top speed of 70 miles per hour, 4 overbank turns, which I don't really count as inversions. Depends on the overbank, but these I would not count them as an inversion. And then the one inversion that it has is a 0G roll, which is probably one of the best elements of the ride, but I will get into that later. So as I've said before, Iron Rattler is located in Fiesta, Texas, which is about a 10-minute drive from downtown San Antonio. Getting to Fiesta can be kind of tricky because, well, obviously you're in the city, so traffic's pretty bad. Once you get to the entrance of Fiesta, Texas, it's not super bad traffic wise. They've got some good lights and way to regulate traffic, but the actual cities and highways, it can be pretty trafficy, and it's kind of bad to get there. And on that note, you can't really see Fiesta from the highways. It really depends where you're coming from, but it's really surrounded by this large quarry wall, and that's what makes Fiesta, Texas so cool. And Iron Rattler, at that matter. Iron Rattler is situated on this large scale quarry wall, and the lift hill goes over the wall and then drops off it, and then there's this one cool part where you're kind of just doing all these little bunny hills on top of the wall, and then you dive off of this quarry wall and then go underground. It's really cool and one of the best airtime moments on the ride. So yeah, Fiesta is located and surrounded by this giant quarry wall, and because of that, it really hides the park. You can see some of the major coasters sticking out above it, depending on where you are on the highway, but it really does hide most of the park. So you take, I believe it's a left turn into the parking lot, and then right as you pass under this kind of large scale tunnel or entrance, immediately you see the skyline, and it's like, whoa, it is insane how you just all of a sudden, boom, there's Fiesta, Texas. And right when you see Fiesta, Texas, you will see Iron Rattler, because it dominates the skyline. It is literally so high. It, like I said, dominates the skyline. It is just sitting high upon that quarry wall, and you can see it from pretty much anywhere in the park once you get into the park. Okay, so now we're going to go through the queue and station building and all that fun stuff to kind of give you an idea of what you can experience through that. So right as you walk up to this ride, you see this big Iron Rattler sign, and there's these two large fountains on each side. There's a snake head on one, and then the snake tail, so I guess the rattle of a rattlesnake. And you pass under this giant sign that says Iron Rattler, and right between these two snake statues, and you come to what is not that great of a queue. It's got some scenery, but it's not the best themed. Obviously, it's Six Flags, so you're not going to expect a lot. It's more than I was expecting going into it, but it's nothing insane. So when you go into this queue, there's a bunch of rocks. Instead of gates and cattle pens, you have these rocks, and it's kind of nice because it's landscaped really nice. So you go around and you kind of go around each of these big stones and finally make your way to the station building. Now, because of that quarry wall that I mentioned earlier, the park, it has some strange terrain. Because of that, the station building is really, really high. Because, well, you gotta be able to get on top of that quarry wall to have that first drop. So the station building is kind of high to begin with. So you gotta climb all the way up to that station building. And it's a pretty big climb. Basically, it's just a bunch of switchbacks all the way up until you get to the station. It's really not that much. There's a couple signs in there that say like world's largest snake caught or something like that. There's a couple like old rusting trucks. But really, it's just a bunch of switchbacks that get you up to the station. And honestly, it's kind of boring. When I went, we didn't have much of a wait, so I could just like pretty much walk all the way up. But I can see how it'd be a pain just if there was a really long line to just have to wait in that portion where you just kind of go up and up and up, and there's nothing really to look at. It's this giant wood structure. That's really all it is. And you can see some of the park from the queue because you're pretty high, but other than that, there's not really much theming. Okay, so once you're done climbing all the ramps and switchbacks, you get to the station. And the station honestly is pretty cool. It's got a bunch of woodwork and really kind of low ceilings made of all wood. It looks, honestly, in my opinion, I think it looks pretty good. It doesn't really need a lot of theming because the wood makes it look like it has theming, but it's kind of hard to explain. Right as you get to the station, you'll notice the trains. It's a really, really cool looking RMC train, even though it's not really an RMC train. RMC, before they got into the real concept of making coasters, they used to contact Gerstlauer to make their trains for them. So Iron Rattler actually has Gerstlauer trains, and they're pretty comfortable. You can't really notice the difference between the Gerstlauer and RMC train. The seat is shaped a little differently, and the lap bar is, I'd say, not as comfortable as a normal RMC restraint. That's my opinion though. I've heard a lot of different opinions about this lap bar. At least it's a lap bar, right? And not some over-shoulder restraint on the RMC. That would be horrible. But yeah, it's a lap bar, so it's comfortable. The front of the train is this giant snake head, and it looks really great. So yeah, the trains look insane, and so you'll board your trains, and now we're going to go through the layout. So the first thing you do is this straight track, and the straight track goes right out of the station. There's a couple drive tires on it just to try to get this train out of the station. After this long piece of straight track, you go into a left-hand turn, but this left-hand turn has a down angle on it, so you actually kind of get whipped down if you're in the back. Again, because the terrain is really kind of strange in this park, you're sitting really high on this piece of straight track, and then you go down this curve, and all of a sudden you're right up against the ground. So it's really strange, but you actually pick up a lot of speed from this turn, and then you hit your lift hill. Then you make your way up this lift hill. It's 179 foot tall. The lift hill itself is actually pretty fast. I was really pleasantly surprised how fast it went, just because of this older RMC, and I was surprised about how fast it made it up this 179 foot tall lift hill. Now we come to one of the best parts of the ride, and that's the drop. Most RMCs, the best part of the ride on an RMC is normally the drop, just because of how RMC profiles their drops. It's so good. Iron Rattler has an 81 degree steepness on this drop, so it's pretty much almost vertical, and you really can't tell a difference. It's really insane. But one of the things that's really almost funny about this drop is, again, playing on that terrain. So like I said, the lift hill, it climbs 179 feet, but the drop is only 171 feet. So you lose 8 foot in the process just because of this kind of wonky terrain. Another kind of cool thing about the drop is it's twisted. So cresting over this drop, you actually get whipped to the left a little bit, which is really, really great in the back row because you just get yanked around this, and it's really fun because you're thrown at an 81-degree angle, and then you're whipped down to the left, and then thrown into this 171-foot drop, which is an insane feeling. In the front, you kind of hang there, so it's not as cool. I'm going to emphasize that later, but in the back, you really do get whipped over this thing, and it's an insane feeling. After the drop, you have this big pull-up, getting some pretty good positive Gs. During the pull-up, though, you actually bank to the right and then do this S-turn. So you're right up against the quarry wall, and it aligns you with the quarry wall perfectly. While you're doing this pull-up and S-turn, there's actually this little roof over you. It's like this little canopy, and it actually delivers a really great head chopper. So now after the pull-up, after the drop, you're pretty much on the ground, but right in front of you is the quarry wall again. It's wrapped all the way around this coaster. So what they did to get around that was they put a strong sustained injector airtime hill to get on top of this quarry wall again. And this airtime hill is one of the best injector moments on the ride. You have, I think it's where you have the fastest airtime. You're moving the fastest because you just got off of that drop and you come into this crazy injector airtime hill. It doesn't really go much down after the hill, kind of just levels out at the top, but the entrance into this hill is insane in the front row, which is why I recommend a front row ride on Iron Rattler. The back row here, it's not the best because you've lost a little bit of your speed already, but front row, you just get thrown up at the beginning of this element. The next element is this kind of wonky wave turn-like turn. It does this, I guess, to kind of kill speed, but it also delivers some good sustained injector airtime in the front row. Again, like I said, you kind of do this element to kill speed a little bit. It's a great element, but it runs through it a little slowly on a cold day. If you go on a summer day, it might fly through this element a lot faster, but it really is there, I guess, to just kind of kill speed, because it really doesn't do much unless you're in the front row on a really hot day. After this element, you level out and bank to the left even more, and then do another kind of smaller wave turn like thing, and this time you dive off the quarry wall. So when you were doing that first wave turn, you were on top of the quarry wall, which is why you didn't have that much speed. But now you dive off of the quarry wall, and you actually get some pretty crazy airtime if you're in the front row, and even more so in the back row here, because you get kind of whipped off this quarry wall. You then bank down and level out, giving you some pretty good positive Gs in both the back and front rows. Then you get to one of the best parts of the ride, which is, in my opinion, well, like I said, one of the best parts of the ride. So you go up and you go into your first inversion, which is a 0G roll. Now the 0G roll is really fun because it's incredibly whippy. It just pulls you through and whips you around this element really fast, especially on a hot summer day where the train is flying. You get absolutely whipped around this element. It feels very complete when you do it. There's nothing about this element that I don't like. If you're riding in the front, this element is very, very whippy, like I said. However, if you're in the back, you don't get as much whip because the train is lost already a lot of speed from this element. So you get more of a floaty sensation. You really feel that 0 Gs going into this element. I like the front row better on this element just because I love the whip and intensity of RMCs, and that's what makes me love RMCs so much. But if you're more of that floaty type 0 G, you know, kind of butterfly feeling, then this is the seat for you. It's the back row. That's going to be the seat for you on this ride. The next element is a pretty awkward one in that the way you traverse it. So the element itself isn't awkward, it's the way in which you come across it and the speed on which you go over it. The element itself is just a airtime hill. It's just a solid camelback hill. If you were going faster, it'd be insane. You get some pretty good airtime in the front row, but in the back row, you don't really feel anything on this ride. So some little bit of injector in the front, not really anything in the back here. The reason for that is because you've lost all your speed. And why you've lost all your speed is because you're on top of the quarry wall again. So right after you exit your 0G roll, you really don't go down that much. You kind of just level out immediately and you're right back on top of the quarry wall. Like I said, the terrain for this coaster is really, really weird. It's cool, but it's kind of weird at the same time. So because of that, you traverse this airtime hill really slowly. The next element is one of the most fun elements, and that is an overbank turn. So after this camelback airtime hill, you bank to the right and go into the overbank turn that I just said. It is a really, really fun element in that you hang there, you get some nice hang time. In the front, you get a little bit of whip through it, and in the back, you get pulled through it. The back goes through it really slow because on top of this quarry wall, you keep losing more and more speed, and it really kind of dulls down the ride. This is one of the parts of the ride where the pacing is kind of like which is why it's probably one of the lower tier RMCs. For me, it's a high RMC because I haven't ridden that many RMCs yet, but compared to other RMCs where the pacing just never stops, it's pretty low because you're going pretty slow here. The element itself is really fun. Like I said, you get hang time, and you kind of can just dangle there for a little bit. And then after you've done banking to the right, you hit your next element, which is again another overbank turn, except this time it banks you to the left. So you get a little whip going from the right to the left transition, which I think the second overbank turn is better because of that whip. But other than that, it has the same speed as the first one. Then you bank to the right after that left-hand bank and go into another airtime hill. This one's even slower than the last one, and you get really nothing. You kind of just get kind of thrown against your restraint just a little bit in the front row, and that's it. Back row, you don't feel nothing. Then here comes the cool part. The next element is a large airtime hill. But the reason it's insane is because now you dive off the quarry wall. And when I say dive, you really do. It feels like a second drop to the coaster. You just get ejected if you're in the front row. Back row, I would say even more so, because now that you're being pulled over this element and you're just ejected out of your seat. Very, very crazy injector airtime. One of the best elements on the ride. Probably the best airtime moment on the ride other than the drop and that first airtime moment right after the drop. It's insane. Probably one of the most picturesque portions of this ride as people just video this element like crazy. Next element is a bank right up against the water. You're right up against like this kind of retention pond thing right next to the river rapids for Fiesta Texas. And you enter this cave tunnel. You enter a tunnel. And you enter a tunnel. And the tunnel is cool because the tunnel is actually going through the quarry wall. And you're like right underneath the first drop at this point. So you're right underneath the drop, going really fast in this tunnel. It's like one of the only times you'll see a tunnel like carved right out of a mountain in a theme park. It's really cool. And in the tunnel, you bank to the right really hard and go up, and that's when you hit your brakes. So you pop up and out of this tunnel and hit your brake run. And actually, when you pop up out of this brake, you actually get really, really sustained injector airtime in the front row. Back row, you don't really feel anything, but front row, you just get thrown over. And it's really fun and a great ending of the ride. It's a lot slower of a hill than, the previous one, but it still gives you some pretty decent injector airtime. And that's it. You hit the brakes and you turn in the left into the station. So the layout is a pretty solid layout. Other than the portion on top of the quarry wall, it's got some good pacing and really, really solid layout. Iron Rattler was one of RMC's first projects that they ever did. So obviously there was some trial and error there coming with this coaster as of, the quarry wall. On top of that quarry wall, it's really slow. The bunny hills are kind of fun, but you don't really get that much airtime. The overbank turns, they're fun, but you go through them so slowly, it's not very enjoyable. It's fun to kind of dangle there. On a winter day though, this coaster is really, really slow on this quarry wall. Or not even winter, just a colder day. The ride is its best when it's a hot summer day, open during the summer, and please get in this ride in front row because that's the best you're going to experience, especially if the train is full. So now that you're back in the station, you got to exit the ride, right? So pick up your stuff from the cubbies that you left. And this is kind of one of the most annoying parts of the ride is you're kind of high up. And I've already said that before, you really are high up. So you got to go down all the way back down to ground level. And to do that, again, there's a bunch of switchbacks. But the exit is actually a longer path, I feel like, than the queue. It takes you longer to go down the exit than it does to walk up the queue. Which, honestly, is kind of a, bad part of this ride. You gotta go all the way down back to ground level, and it really does take a while to get back. So if you wanted to re-ride this coaster, you gotta go all the way down and then all the way back up again. It would probably take a solid 5 minutes, not gonna lie. It would really probably take 5 minutes to get to the station again, which would make it a really, really hard coaster to marathon. So finally you get to your gift shop where after you go down this switchbacks and all the way around this station building. It takes a while, but finally you get to your gift shop. You can buy a couple gifts and stuff, see your on-ride photos, and then you finally hit your main path, and then you can go re-ride if you want to. So that's one of the downsides of this coaster. It takes a while to get up to the station and then a while to get back down to the ground floor. But other than that, the ride itself is really great. Like I've said, this was one of RMC's first creations, so, they're still getting the hang of their coasters at this point. Obviously, they've done some incredible things. They've got Steel Vengeance, Iron Gwazi now. Those have perfected their layouts. But Iron Rattler, it is a fantastic RMC. If you're coming to San Antonio, please go ride this ride. It is a must-do. It's a crazy RMC. One of the best drops on an RMC ever. This is one of my favorite drops on an RMC, hands down. Way better than New Texas Giant and Outlaw Run, which I will also have separate reviews for on this channel. So without further ado, I'll give you a score for this coaster. I'm going to rank it an 8.5 out of 10. The coaster is great, but the theming is kind of eh, and then the slow portion on top of the quarry wall, I wish it was sped up. I wish it was faster. You can't really get faster than that. But it's an RMC, so it's really comfortable. Its airtime is extraordinary and one of the best coasters in this park. And even in Texas, I'd go as far as this is probably the best coaster in Texas, guys. So please come out to Fiesta, Texas and ride this coaster. It's insane. You will thank me later, and I hope y'all get to ride it. So that's going to be it for this video. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope y'all enjoyed the review. If you want to see more of this content, please like and subscribe. It really helps me out. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will catch you next time. Bye.